The museum in Alexandria Bay celebrating Akwesasne history. In July, the Cornwall Brothers Store Museum borrowed a display from the Akwesasne Cultural Center. It shows those who worked in the 19th century iron industry, but also those who are influential in the Akwesasne community now. Tuesday, the museum will have a Mohawk mother speaking on the history of Akwesasne backstry.
It talks about the different jobs and skills that the Akwesasne people have and a bit of their history also. It's important to remember that those people were here originally.
Pretty good fundraiser coming up tomorrow night for the museum. It's called Night at the Museum. Beginning at 7 o'clock, people are welcome to dress up as their favorite historical figure.